In this tutorial series, we'll learn about how to use the ETF tool, standing for IFO Testing Framework, to build a fast prototype for your software application. So let's get started with a simple example for bank system. In my case, I assume that I simply have an ETF folder on my desktop, and then I'm going to store everything related to this small tutorial inside this folder. Inside the folder, to begin with, I have a textual file called bankevents.txt. This is so-called the abstract user interface specification file for the ETF to generate classes for you. Okay, let's have a look at the contents for that and see why it is called abstract user interface. If I open the file, so you can see we start with the keyword system. So system bank. So we are specifying the abstract user interface for banking system. And then inside we got 1, 2, 3, and 4 possible events that a user might initiate in order to communicate with your software system. So here you can see that the way we specify the user interface is by using simply just textual form that can be typed on the command line. So that's why we said it's a fast prototyping for your system. Later on, once you are happy with the whole prototypes, you can definitely elaborate or refine your user interface into maybe, for example, Android device with the radio buttons, text boxes, and spinner. Okay, all the fancy user interface components. But that's not the purpose for ETF. For ETF, we want to make sure the user interface can give you just a minimum, so you can focus more on building the business logic for your application. That's something I will show you later in the tutorial video. Okay, so let's just go over the abstract user interface very quickly. So the first event we have is called new, which means we can create, given an ID, the input ID of type string, we can create a new bank account. Okay, and then the second event is called deposit. Given an account ID, we want to deposit certain amount, and for simplicity, we simply say the amount is an integer into the account. And we might also withdraw from some certain accounts identified by its ID some certain amounts of type integer. And we may also transfer from account number 1 to the account number 2 with some certain amounts. Okay, so these are the 4 possible events that might occur for our software application. And as far as the user interface is concerned, they're at the moment abstract. So we don't worry about any concrete user interface like a radio button or drop-down menu. Okay. So let's see how the ETF can take this abstract user interface file and then generate a starter project for us to begin with. So what I will do is I will simply go to the command line. So in your case, you might be given the generated starter projects already, so you don't have to use the ETF tool. Or you might be given access to the ETF tool, which is rarely the case. So I would say this first video in the series is only for you to get the complete picture about how the ETF tool can be used. But typically, for your lab assignments or projects, you're simply just given the generated projects by ETF already to begin with. So you don't have to worry about how to use the ETF command, but I'll just show you anyway. Okay, so now let's see how we can use it. So my current directory is under the ETF folder that I just created on my desktop. And then I have just the abstract user interface file called bankevents.txt. So this is how I can generate the whole, the entire starter projects. I'll say ETF-new, and then I will pass the name of the abstract user interface file, and then I want to generate just everything, let's say inside a folder. How about that? So I can just go back to my ETF folder over here. Let's simply just put a folder over here. Let's just call that bank. Okay, so everything that's going to be generated to start with will be put inside this bank folder. And then I can simply just put bank over here. And then I'll hit enter. So everything up to now has been automatically generated according to what we have specified in the bank events user interface file. Okay, so now up to now we are fine. So what I would like to do to end this video is to show you how you can compile the starter projects. The starter projects generated by the ETF tool is guaranteed to compile. Okay, so let's just see how we can compile that. So there are 2 ways you can compile. Either you can use the command line tool for your IFO compiler, or you can simply use IFO Studio to compile that. I'll show you the command line version first, and then the eStudio version. So for the command version over there, so let's say, first of all, we have ls. So we have our bank folder. So let's go into bank. Okay. So now we have all sorts of generated file in IFO. Specifically, this is the configuration file we have to use in order to compile the starter projects. So what we can type is this. So IFO compiler 1807. In your case, it might be just EC if you are working on the prison lab, but it might be just say EC 1807 -C compile. Let me say I just want to freeze it. So it will be available in the W code. If you want to finalize it, you can say dash and then finalize. Okay, either way, I'll just let me say freeze. And then I will do dash config, and then I will choose the bank.ecf file. So there's also another ECF file called bank fresh ECF. It's only useful when you want to renew your projects, which is another option for the ETF tool. Unless explicitly told to actually touch this file, I would say don't worry about it. You always worry about the bank.ecf file. Okay, so now I'm done. So let me just hit enter, and it's going to compile the entire projects. Okay, it wouldn't take long. So one more thing, while it is compiling, let me just explain a little bit more about the abstract user interface over here. So there is certain syntax we have to follow in order to make sure the projects can be generated. If you make any syntax error in your abstract user interface file, it is not going to be taken from by the ETF. So that's a prerequisite, a precondition. Okay. So now over here, for the basic types, you can put string, you can put integer. We also have character, we also have real, we also have boolean. You can even put tuple types and also array types. So this is quite a rich number of data types that you can use in order to actually build your abstract user interface for your software application. Okay, let me just go back there and see. Okay, the C compilation completed. Okay, so this is already available for me to run. For example, if I can just go to ifgens, and then I can go into bank as a project name by default, because remember the system over here is called bank. So that's just the folder will just match that name for the system. And then I can go to W code because I only freeze it, and also I can say bank again. Okay, so that's something I can do. Okay, but rather than I will show you this a little bit later in later videos. What I want to show you to end this video is to show you how you can compile also from IFO Studio the same idea. What I can do is I can go to eStudio, and then whatever the version it is, in your case, eStudio, and then I'll just want to choose that project over there. I can say add projects, and then I will go to let's say desktop, and then I will go to ETF bank, and then the ifgens is already there since we just compiled using the command line, but I just want to show you. But if you wanted to compile, you can just say bank over here. If you want to recompile from scratch, you can simply click on clean and then choose compile. That will also work. Okay, but let's not do it. Let's not duplicate the work since we already did it. So I can simply say open over here. So once you open that, start a project is automatically generated by ETF from the abstract user interface file. So this is what you get. Okay. One thing to note, you do see we got eSpec over here, so that means unit testing is available over here. We also got other sorts of libraries which you don't have to worry about when you are developing your projects. So I will, in the later videos, I will start talking about the internal structure of the generated code, and for you as the software developer, how you can gradually change the business model so that it will fit your purpose.